We'll open our, yes, thank you. We'll open our meeting by watching a video. And so Christina, I think you can start the video now.
What does justice look like in a changing climate? Endless flooding in the streets, from Jakarta to Houston. Toxic air pollution that kills millions of people every year. Lethal heat waves. Record wildfires. The decline of coral reefs and the hopes of hundreds of millions who depend on them. This is what happens to a planet in the hands of corrupt governments and fossil fuel companies. Climate change is not some future problem. The crisis is now. With each passing year, the challenges mount higher and higher. So what can we do? How do we build a world that's just, environmentally, economically, and socially? First things first, it's time to end the reign of fossil fuels. Cut off the money flow to new fossil fuel projects so they don't get built. Pass widespread laws to keep oil, coal, and gas in the ground. In their place, we need new systems. Economies based on renewable energy that will keep our emissions in check. But the change we need won't come from the top. This is the people's fight. Only by working together can we turn ripples of hope into a tidal wave of change. The solutions lie in us, in our communities, and in our ancestral knowledge. And this movement includes everyone across class, gender, geography, race, and age. 350.org is the spark that ignites the global climate movement. Together, we will mobilize millions to take action. Students, workers' unions, human rights and social justice groups, marginalized communities and faith groups, universities, business owners, and all those who know it's time for change. We will campaign globally and locally to bring an end to the fossil fuel era. And we will support the growing movement by sharing resources and strategies to affect real change. Only together can we stand up to power and greed. Only together will we have the chance to build a just, fair, and livable world for us all. Join us.
Thank you, Christina. We hope you found this video inspiring. It was produced by 350.org, and Phyllis suggested we view it together to get a better understanding of the theory of change that 350 is using. So let's take a moment and take 2 deep breaths and reflect on our ties to this land that we live on. This photo of trees lining Lake Monona was taken 2 to 3 weeks ago. As we acknowledge our ties to the land, let us also acknowledge the Ho-Chunk Nation, who I learned from their website currently number 7,489 people and have been on these lands for over 3 ice ages. The Ho-Chunk cultural ways, songs, and stories guide them with values of how to respect the land, the animals, and how we live in balance with nature. So now we'll do a quick overview of the evening. we've gone through the welcome, and next we'll have a short reflection on COP26 and a little time to socialize in small groups. Then we'll hear from our speaker, Emily Park, and then updates from our teams and our groups. After we wrap up, stay online for optional trainings in an easy software resist bot, another breakout room to build skills in peer-to-peer fundraising, and another breakout to chat further with our speaker about the Federal Reserve campaign. Let me now turn it over to Julia Isaacs, another member of our monthly meeting team.
Thanks, Marion. I want to give a shout out to Kelly Kearns, also the monthly meeting team, who will behind the scenes put you in breakouts, and to Christina, who's going to, in fact, Christina, could you advance the slides? Is going to continue advancing the slides. So, I just thought I'd take a moment to point out that yesterday was the beginning of COP26. And I realized I was saying COP26 and not knowing what that stood for. It's Conference of the Parties, all the different countries that signed the Paris Agreement. And they had the goals they submitted in the Paris Agreement, which we all talked about, for reducing carbon emissions. But of course, what they submitted in 2015 wasn't, large enough, even to get it below 2 degrees, never mind 1.5 degrees. So every 5 years, there's something called a ratchet mechanism where they try to come up with more ambitious goals. And so this is the year that they're doing that, which makes this, a bigger COP than some of the earlier ones. So next slide. I'm not an expert in COP26, but I thought I'd share a few expert views. I'll read this very quickly. If you think the COP alone is going to save the climate, you are fooling yourself. You are delusional. You can't continue the fantasies that somehow these annual meetings are going to solve climate change. It's a false expectation. However, the gathering can create energy and momentum. It's a strong signaling mechanism to tell the world that climate change is incredibly important, that we need to change faster than we thought yesterday. And that's a quote from someone who's quoted in the Washington Post. Another quote from the UN's Special Advisor on Climate Change said, well, is it a moment of unity, collaboration, and cooperation? Or will we see geopolitical tensions, divisions, and confrontations emerge? I'm hoping it's the former. And then the UN Secretary General said, if we want real success, not just a mirage, we need more ambition and more action. That will only be possible with a massive mobilization of political will. All these quotes are from the Washington Post yesterday when I was throwing these together. Next slide. I'm sharing another view about COP26. I don't know if it's about COP26 in particular or about the whole politicians trying to take action. But I'd like to hear your view. For those that want to, just throw in the chat what you think about as what prayers, hopes, fears, what's your view on COP26? And if you have a suggestion, better than the Washington Post, I'm from DC area, so that's what I read. But if you have a suggestion of where you get your news about COP26, just throw it in the chat and we'll just take a few minutes to see anyone else want to share their view on COP26?
Looks like John has a hand up.
I just was wondering if I could share one more quote, which I really, really liked, and I think it kind of speaks to 350 Madison. It's from Bill McKibben, his email that he sent out yesterday, part of his regular email list. It seemed like it would fit in possibly. People don't have much power at the COP. It's all experts and diplomats and lobbyists. But people, by building movements, have set the bar high enough to matter. Movements are why we're talking about 1.5 degrees as a target. Movements are why politicians feel they can't come home from Glasgow with nothing, as they did a decade ago at Copenhagen. Just felt like I appreciate it because it felt like it connected me and the work that we do in 350 Madison with what's going on in Copenhagen right now. So thank you.
I'm appreciating what I'm seeing in the chat, and thank you, John. A couple of shout outs to Democracy Now! As a good place to follow the coverage, the New York Times. It's too little, too late. The voices of young people are very prominent. Hopefully it will yield good outcomes, but not putting all of my eggs in one basket. People like us will still be needed. I know it's a small piece of the puzzle, but I hope it feeds momentum into bigger action. Excited about the NGOs that are meeting there. They're more concerned with money. They may care about the climate, they really don't get it. There are just so many other elements clouding their judgments, too little, too late. I don't think Biden understands how dire the situation. The Guardian is an excellent source. IPCC, worried due to the short time frame for action. So thank you. We like to make these meetings interactive, and actually we're gonna make this meeting even more interactive. Unless you really hate it, we're gonna put you in little small breakout rooms. If you don't wanna go, just don't join. You can hang out in the main room. But Kelly is gonna assign us into breakout rooms. There should be approximately 4, maybe 5 people in your room. And Marion, can you put the questions in the chat? Basically, the question is, what's your name? Why do you work on Madison's work on climate change? And why do you keep on working with us? So Kelly, I think you can open up those rooms. Thank you.
So Lynn, Kevin, Sierra, any of you want to get moved to a breakout room? Seth?
Well, welcome back, everyone. I enjoyed the conversation I had with 3 other people, and I hope you enjoyed your conversation too. It's not the same as chatting in person, but it's what we can do right now. Where am I? I'll ask for my next slide. That will tell me where I am. Oh, I get to introduce Emily. So now we're going to turn to our speaker. Happy to introduce Emily Park as tonight's speaker. And of course, many of you know Emily because she's been active with 350 since she joined about 4 years ago. And she's very active, leads the Communication Action Team, which we call CAT. And she represents that team on the Coordinating Council. She's also, I know her best through her work on the Divest and Defund team. I love the way she does live streams of actions, including like going into a bank with a camera, which makes the bank people very nervous. She joins us today speaking from her newest role as a staff member who splits her time between 350 Madison and 350 US. For the 350 US, she's working on the Fossil Free Fed campaign, and I'll turn it over to Emily to tell us about that campaign. Oh, and as she speaks, maybe she'll say this, but if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and then I'll kind of, pile them up and ask them of her after her presentation.
Sounds good to me. Hi, everybody. So I think I know about half of you. I think half of you I've met either in person or on Zoom, but for those of you I haven't met, I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns. I live on the west side of Madison. We've lived here for about 2015, and since 2015, and I've been involved with 350 Madison since January of 2019. Yeah, and I'm really excited to have started this new role as splitting my time between 350 US and Madison, working on the Fossil Free Fed campaign for 350 US, and then helping out with communication stuff for Madison. So tonight I was going to be talking about the 350 US's new Federal Reserve campaign. It's really just targeted towards ending all fossil fuel financing. So next slide, please. So just a really quick primer on fossil fuel financing. So the US is one of the biggest funders of fossil fuels, if you count like our banks and our government. So just in the second half of 2020, the Federal Reserve pumped $828 million into the fossil fuel industry with the Main Street Lending Program, and that was just in the second half of 2020. Oh, sorry, I should say the little numbers in parentheses are my sources, and at the end, I think at the end, someone's going to drop in the chat a link to a document with all of my sources. So if you want to find out more, you can look. Oh, Marion just dropped it in the chat, so you can click on the links that are numbered corresponding to the sources. So yeah, 828 million just in the second half of 2020. Estimates are that now it's all the way up to above 2 trillion is the estimate currently for the Fed putting money into the fossil fuel industry just during the pandemic. Between 2016 and 2020, the 6 biggest US banks collectively loaned 1.2 trillion to the fossil fuel industry. That represents 1/3 of total global bank support for fossil fuels. And I should mention that all 6 of those US banks that loaned that money are all under the supervision of the Federal Reserve System. The worst offenders, which many of you have probably heard of, are Chase, Citibank, and Wells Fargo. And they've all pretended to be green, but have continued pumping money into fossil fuels. So, Chase will talk about how it's funding solar panels on one hand, and then with the other hand, they'll go and they'll fund Enbridge's Line 5, Line 3, which we all know, bad news for Wisconsin, the Midwest, and the whole world. So they've really shown that the banks are not going to be stopping lending money to fossil fuel projects anytime soon. As long as there's still short-term profits to be made, they don't care. They're just going to keep doing it. They might try to make money from renewable energy technologies at the same time, but they're not going to end fossil fuel financing unless we make them. Next slide, please. So what are central banks? The idea of a central bank is a little bit of an economics wonk kind of thing. So a little bit nerdy. And if you're like me, maybe you don't give a lot of thought to what central banks do on a day-to-day basis. Their first role is issuing money. So that obviously it's the treasury that prints the money, but the central bank is the one that decides when new money is needed to pump into the economy. They ensure the stability of the banking system. So they regulate lending and things like that. So to prevent another crisis like what happened in 2008 and 2009 with the housing bubble, they presumably try to prevent that. The US Federal Reserve System was created in the aftermath of the Great Depression to try to prevent that from happening again. They are the lender of last resort to both commercial banks and the government. So if commercial banks run out of money and they can't meet their obligations to the people who have accounts with them, then they turn to the Fed or whatever country's central bank we're talking about. And then they also regulate monetary policy, like setting interest rates, things like that. Next slide, please. So a lot of people have asked, like, what could central banks do with regards to climate change? So some sort of overview of general actions they could do. Central banks could exclude fossil fuels from their own portfolios. So a lot of central banks are sitting on a very massive pile of money that some central banks will then invest in various projects. So they could take their money out of fossil fuels. They can regulate commercial banks lending to fossil fuel producers. To do that, they would make lending prohibitively expensive, or they can expressly say, no, you can't do that. That is within their scope of responsibilities. And then they can also address the financial system's failure to put a price on climate risk. So they can say, okay, the financial system has not thought about what the economic repercussions are of the climate crisis. Next slide. All right, so the US Federal Reserve System, that's our central bank, the US's central bank. So ultimately they answer to Congress, but the day-to-day operations are overseen by the Board of Governors. So the Board of Governors operate more or less independently of Congress. So they don't have to get approval from Congress for all the things they do. Congress can give them orders, but they don't have to ask for permission every day. Then there's also the Federal Open Market Committee that works within the Fed system, but the majority of the work is done by the Federal Reserve banks. So the system refers to the board, the FOMC, and then the banks themselves. So each of the 12 Federal Reserve banks in the country operate somewhat autonomously from each other, and then they all answer to the Board of Governors. Next slide, please. I mentioned that there are 12 Federal Reserve banks. Sorry, I didn't realize this image was going to be so grainy. But you can kind of read it. So the big dots with the labels on them, those are the locations of the 12 main Fed banks. And then as you can see, the map is color-coded, showing you which state falls into which region. So not all the regions are the same size geographically or population-wise or financially, frankly. Don't ask me how those lines got drawn. I don't know. They seem kind of random to me. But as you can see, we are within the Chicago Fed Reserve System. And then several of the banks, particularly the ones that oversee larger geographical territories, have branch offices, and those are the unlabeled black dots. So there's also, as you can see, there's also a branch of the Chicago Fed in Detroit. So if you were going to go to Detroit, it would be labeled the Federal Reserve Branch of Chicago. Sorry, Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago in Detroit. Kind of confusing. Next slide. All right, so why are we targeting the Federal Reserve and why now specifically? So as I said earlier, we've seen that Chase, Wells Fargo, Citibank, they're not going to be changing their ways anytime soon, as long as they can still be making profits. 350, including 350 Madison, and then the Stop the Money Pipeline Coalition, Rainforest Action Network, Rising Tide, many different groups and coalitions have been working on this fight for years. There's been some progress, but not anywhere near enough that we were hoping. Definitely, we want to keep up the pressure on the banks, but we also want to start pressuring other entities that can force the banks to do what we want. We also know that the climate crisis is an economic threat. So even if you're someone who just doesn't care about people in the Pacific, their island being underwater, even if you don't care about that, maybe you care about the economy. And it's definitely a threat to the economy. And of course, we know it's also disproportionately impacting low-income and BIPOC communities. And then those are the communities that the US government and therefore the Fed also, have to help support, help them with access to food and housing. So if we can reduce the impact on these communities from the climate, that would help the economy in general. So the climate crisis is a strain on the financial system, and it will continue to get worse. As far as timing goes, we kicked off this campaign to align with COP26. For once, climate is front and center in politicians' minds, business leaders' minds. That's not an afterthought. So we're hoping that government leaders, business leaders, the media will really sit up and take notice of what we're saying right now. Next slide, please. Gotten a lot of questions about whether the Fed can legally do what we're trying to ask them to do. So the Fed's general mandate is to manage macro level risks to the financial system and the economy. So in 2020, climate disasters, so hurricanes, et cetera, cost the US an estimated $95 billion. And that is twice the cost of other climate disasters that happened in 2019. So it's getting worse, and it is getting worse fast. That's why we think that this qualifies as a macro level risk to the financial system. So this is within the Fed's mandate. Just earlier this year, President Biden issued an executive order on climate finance. We're asking that financial systems start putting more weight on climate risks when they're making their lending policy. You can read more about that in the document that Marianne put in the chat. There's also a bill before the House right now that would demand an end to all fossil fuel financing in the US by 2030. And generally speaking, legal scholars on both sides of the political spectrum, it's generally agreed upon that this is something that is legal for the Fed to do. It falls within the Fed's scope of responsibilities, but the question is whether the Fed should. So there are a lot of people who think that just because the Fed can do this doesn't mean it has to do it. So I would say that the Fed has the ability to act on climate. What it lacks now is the will. So that's what the fossil-free finance bill would force them to do. But let's be honest, the fossil-free finance bill before the House right now, it's not going to pass the way it's written. It's too extreme for centrists and people on the right. So that's why we're going to keep up with what we're doing. Next slide, please. All right, so this is by our, I mean 350 US's specific asks of the US Federal Reserve System. So right now, the first ask is asking President Biden to appoint a real climate leader to chair the Federal Reserve. The current chair of the Federal Reserve, his name is Jerome Powell. He was a Trump appointee, and he is up for renomination or replacement in early 2022. So sometime, I think the expectation is sometime a little after Thanksgiving, but nobody really knows for sure. Sometime soon, President Biden will be naming his candidate for the chair. Traditionally, this is considered a nonpartisan position, and traditionally what you do is you just keep renominating the same chair until he or she doesn't want to serve anymore, or until they like mess up really bad. So before we launched this campaign, the odds were like 9-1 that president would just renominate Powell. But now we've added a lot of dialogue to this, and people are actually paying attention. This isn't something anybody really cared about before. Of the Federal Reserve specifically, we're asking for an end to bank fossil fuel financing. So the Fed should use all of its tools to start limiting and phasing down the financing of emissions by 2030. All Fed spending, so by that I mean loaning to fossil fuel companies, investment, asset purchases, everything that the Fed does should align with the Paris Climate Agreement's goal of limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Maybe we'll update this ask depending on what comes out of Glasgow. I don't know. We'll see. The third ask of the Fed is to push banks to invest. So actively encourage and support bank investment in sustainable energy technologies, anything that will limit the global temperature rise. And then we really want an emphasis on lending to low income and BIPOC communities, since these are the communities that are going to be hardest hit by the climate crisis. We also are asking Congress to expand the Fed's mandate to eliminate racial, gender, and class disparities. We believe, again, we being 350 US, believe that part of the just transition to a sustainable future means economic fairness for all. Next slide, please. All right, so why not just renominate Jerome Powell? To be fair to Chairman Powell, he has done some good things. He's really been aggressive on keeping the unemployment rate low. So he's done good things, and but some things he hasn't done, or he has not at all given any thought to climate. In fact, a few years ago, he explicitly said he didn't think that was the Fed's problem. And he also has not been particularly strong on Wall Street regulation at all. Powell has shown that he will cave to pressure from fossil fuel lobbyists. So just last year, fossil fuel lobbyists convinced Powell to change the Main Street lending program's rules. So the Main Street lending program was intended to only lend to businesses for pandemic-related reasons. So if you're a restaurant and you couldn't be open and you want to pay your employees, that qualifies. But the fossil fuel lobbyists convinced Powell to change the rules so that the Fed could lend money to fossil fuel companies, even if their problems existed before the pandemic started. So basically, retroactively making them qualify. So that's part of that $800 and something million figure I gave earlier in the presentation. And then because of Powell's leadership saying that this is not the Fed's problem, the US Fed is already behind other central banks. No central bank has taken really decisive action, but Japan and a couple in Europe have at least started moving in that direction. So we're behind. And then there's this group called the Network for Greening the Financial System, which, like it sounds, is a network of international network of central banks looking at protecting the financial system from effects of the climate crisis. So promoting a green economy. That group was formed in 2017. Powell could have joined that group at any point, but he did not join it until after the Electoral College had certified Joe Biden's win, which shows that he only did it when it was politically convenient for him. Because I think once he saw that Biden had won the presidential election, he's like, okay, now I got to get on this like green bandwagon. So he could have done it at any point, but he waited until it was politically convenient for him. Next slide, please. All right, so I talked a little bit earlier about what central banks could do in general, but more specifically, how the Fed could meet our demands. So one thing they could do is require that large private financial institutions, by private, I mean like Chase, so not government owned, because obviously Chase is like a publicly traded company. So large financial institutions divest from carbon intensive industries deemed destabilizing to the climate and the economy. So under that rule, they could say Enbridge's pipelines are destabilizing to the climate and the economy because they obviously contribute to climate change. They will destabilize the local economy if they burst and the water supply is damaged, etc. They can also assess banks for climate risks using stress tests and then add climate risks to its own examination work. And by that, I mean, so the Fed has mandatory disclosure rules, and they could make it so that climate-related factors were part of the disclosure rules. So that would require that banks share quantitative information on greenhouse gas pollution that they're financing. So they would have to tell anybody who is investing with Chase, we directly financed this many million pounds of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere. So that would be something that they would be required to disclose if the Fed were to meet our demands. And then when I say stress tests, so those are basically modeling experiments to see how a bank and a financial system will respond to certain stresses, such as the climate crisis. Currently, climate-related stress tests are not required, but we could ask that those become mandatory in the future. Next slide, please. So international efforts to get central banks to act on climate have varied a lot. I guess the short version of this is a lot of banks have done a little bit, but nobody has done a lot. So the EU recently, as in July, announced that they have a number of upcoming policy changes related to the climate. So far, they haven't actually implemented those. So they've talked about it a lot, but have not actually done anything. Still, that's many steps ahead of the US. The French central bank, they were the primary impetus for setting up the network for greening the financial system that I mentioned earlier. France's central bank does own shares in coal companies. So it is in the process of divesting all of its coal investments and has restricted future fossil fuel investments. So they've been doing better than most central banks. Japan has also started talking about moving in that direction and has done a couple of little things, but nothing big. The Swiss National Bank made its own operational activities carbon neutral, but it's not made any changes yet to its investment or policy. So lots of talk, not a lot of action so far. Next slide, please. So I know this is a very small chart, kind of hard to read. This is in one of the documents linked in the source list that Marion put in the chat, so you can look at it later. But red means that a country has not done anything in that particular column. Orange means they've done a little bit, yellow, a little bit more maybe. But as you can see, nobody's got a green light in any of these boxes. But some of them at least have some orange and yellow showing up. As you can see, the US is pretty much on par only with Russia. So the US's central bank is on par with Russia's in terms of acting on climate. That's embarrassing. I think we can do better. We are a democratic country, unlike Russia. We, not quite as much of our economy is based on fossil fuels as Russia's is. So we should be doing better. We should be doing better than Russia, certainly. Next slide, please. All right, so just a little bit of update on what the 350 US's Fossil Free Fed campaign has done so far. The official soft launch of the campaign was in August. The intent was to go to the annual meeting of the Fed Board of Directors, which they usually hold in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was described to me as basically a time for a bunch of old white men to pat themselves on the back and tell themselves what a good job they're doing. And they meet at a lodge in Teton National Park, and 350 US had obtained a permit to protest on the lawn directly outside of the windows in the conference room that the Fed was going to be meeting in. Unfortunately, that conference got moved to online only because the Delta variant took off, and Wyoming is basically crawling with COVID, or was in the summer at least. So unfortunately, that didn't end up happening, but that was the official launch to our campaign. We got a lot of really good media attention, which is surprising again, because the Fed is not a particularly interesting topic to most people. And then just last Friday, on the 29th, we had a global day of action. So this was in conjunction with the Future Coalition and many, many other climate groups in the US and globally. So there were 36 events in the US alone on Friday. And of those 36, 13 had Fed-specific messaging in them. Some of them were more focused on like Chase and Citibank, but 13 of them had Fed-specific language. So Fed actions included New York City, Philadelphia, DC, Richmond, Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, San Antonio, St. Louis, Chicago, Kansas City, Denver, and San Francisco. So now that our in-person actions are done, we're going to be pivoting towards recruiting and supporting local groups across the country, hopefully including 350 Madison. But exactly what we're doing next is going to depend on what happens with COP, Biden's Fed nomination, and Congress. But we're in this for the long haul. Next slide, please. All right, so what can you do right now? Write to President Biden and urge him to nominate a climate champion to chair the Fed. And we also want climate activists in other leadership positions. So 350 US is particularly asking for Lael Brainerd as chair, Dr. Lisa Cook for vice chair, and Sarah Bloom Raskin as vice chair of supervision. But just urging President Biden, keep that in mind when you're making your nomination would be good. Urge your senators to vote no if Jerome Powell comes across their desks. So Biden makes the nomination, but then the Senate has to confirm it. So urge your senators to say no on Jerome Powell if he gets renominated. Urge your House representative to officially endorse and support the Fossil Free Finance Act that I was talking about earlier. And then the biggest, most important thing is just spread the word. This is a weird topic. It's wonky. It's for econ nerds, but we want to demystify it and we want to increase just the public's awareness of it. So yeah, next slide, please. These are just some pictures of the actions that happened on Friday. So the top left corner is, I believe that's DC. That's the Board of Directors headquarters. Top right, that is the New York City one, right there below the Brooklyn Bridge. That was the 9-year anniversary of Hurricane Sandy. Bottom left is an art action happening in San Francisco. The middle one is Richmond, Virginia. Next slide, please. And then these slides are all from Chicago. So 12 of us from Madison went down to Chicago on Friday. So thank you to all the 12 people who came. The event in Chicago was rainy. It was the middle of a day on a weekday, and we still had well over 100 people at the march. We were marching up the middle of LaSalle and Ida B. Wells Parkway and some other streets in the financial district. Definitely blocking traffic for 90 minutes. So in the top right corner and the bottom picture, you can see a few different 350 Madison members helping hold up these signs. Next slide, please. The theme of this was zombies, basically. So we've got, as you can see in the lower right picture, there's Russ, and I think that's Phyllis in the top left picture holding the fossil fuel loans sign. So the theme was these are zombie bankers. They're mindless, they're brainless. All they want is money and oil instead of brains. And then they were being fought off by this other group of activists representing Mother Nature. So it was a really, really great event. And thank you so much to all the 350 Madison people who made that happen. Next slide. Yeah, so all the sources that I cited in here are in that document. If you only have time to read one of them, I recommend the one by Evergreen, but they're all interesting. Julia, did I talk too long to have time for questions?
We have time for a couple of questions. Let's take down the slide so I can see people's faces, although I'm mostly looking in the chat. I mean, one question I saw was, you know, I could see in Wisconsin that some of us in southern Wisconsin are in the Chicago Fed, and northern Wisconsin is more in the Minnesota Fed. And so how, as field organizer, like, are you coordinated with the Minnesota 350?
Yeah, so I was for 1029, I was responsible for 8 different Fed regions, but Minnesota, the St. Paul, Minneapolis one fell under a different organizer's sort of umbrella, I guess. 350 or Minnesota 350 was not active on 1029 with the Fed campaign because they had plans for other protests, I think targeting Chase going on. Also with, you know, in their search for a new executive director, I think they're a little bit in flux right now. So they were not wanting to take on a new campaign just yet.
Okay, someone had asked that question about, but in general, can you say anything about how, I mean, now that you're partly at US National, can you give us any clues as to how much, I don't know, if there's much coordination of the different 350s, or is that too hard a question?
Between 350 US and the local groups, I would say 350 US very much wants to take the lead from the local groups. If the local group wants a lot of involvement from 350 US, then you know, we're there to provide that. But if it's a group that's pretty, you know, active and knows what they're doing, you know, we don't want to, like, 350 US doesn't want to come in and dictate to them what they should be focusing on. Like, we wouldn't want somebody you know, from 350 US coming in and telling us, okay, we think your D&D campaign is dumb, you should be focusing on the other things. Like, no, that's not what we want. And we definitely do want to, but again, by we, I'm talking about 350 US right now, see more interaction between the 350 local groups. I thought one of the reasons I thought Friday was so great is because 350 Madison was working in really close conjunction with 350 Chicago. I know Russ went to a lot of the planning meetings involved with Friday. And we also worked with Rising Tide Chicago and XR Chicago. So I think it's a great opportunity for 350 chapters to work together.
Okay. Oh, and then Christina's put in, someone had asked you the names of 3UX350's picks, but Christina has helpfully put them in the chat for you. Lael Brainerd is chair. Well, they're right there in the chat. Could you clarify which of the, if Phyllis wants to read one of the 10 things, I thought you said it was evergreen, but can you like give us a number or which of the 10?
Number three, the Evergreen Collaboratives, 5 steps the next Fed Reserve Chair must take.
Okay.
That one's pretty informative and it's much shorter. The Oil Change International report, number 5, and the Roosevelt Institute one, number 9. Those are both very informative, but they're also long. So
Okay. So
read them a few times.
Number 3 on that list, 5 steps. That's probably as many steps as we could take at this point. Well, thank you, Emily. You'll have to look in the chat. There's lots of thanks for your presentation. And thank you. I mean, I know I saw Kathleen. I know you mentioned Phyllis, Russ. Thanks to everyone who went down to Chicago. And actually, Seth, you may have gone to Chicago. I'm not sure. You're doing many things at once.
Did,
That's
yeah.
actually my segue to one of the things we want to do today is, we're trying to inform you about this campaign, but also as activists, we all like to brush up on our skills and hear about new exciting ways to do activism. And Seth has something to share with us in that line.
Thank you, Julia. What I want to share first is some good news that Emily just passed along to me today, and some thanks. So at the last Stop the Money pipeline action that happened in Madison, we were outside of Chase Bank. And as we've done a few times this year, we were circulating a petition, gathering signatures, calling for people to sponsor some companion legislation to this Fossil-Free Finance Act that Emily spoke of earlier. And so it's now, the news is that it's going to happen. So thank you for everyone who gathered signatures, who signed that petition, either digitally or online. And as I look forward to seeing it happen in the Senate and to urging our own Senate delegation to sign that. So what I am going to give an overview of is a tool to help with making these sort of legislative contacts to our senators, the president, all sorts of our elected officials. And the tool is called ResistBot. And this is not a demo on how to use ResistBot, although if you happen to have your smartphone or your iPhone with you, you could do this. There's not a whole lot to say beyond just the title of this slide. Text the word resist to the number 50409. What I'm going to talk about more is the why of this particular tool. And there'll be, as mentioned earlier, a breakout earlier to go over it. But just want to mention how this action that happened a little over a week ago on the square at Chase Bank had this feature where we were gathering signatures on a petition to then send to Congress. And that is really different, something that we wouldn't really have considered doing 3 years ago when we started getting involved in the Chase campaign, for reasons that I think are fairly obvious, but I'll just go over them. You know, it was a very different congressional climate back then. And also we had a different occupant in the White House. And the people in leadership there, just not many of them were allies of the climate justice agenda. So any time is really a good time, I would say, to mount a corporate campaign and do actions to try and pressure a corporation that's polluting the earth to change. But it was an especially good time then. But now there's many more allies in Congress. We have a, in some ways, self-declared ally in the White House to the climate justice agenda, although in many ways he has things to do to really put that into place. And there's many, many reasons to stay in touch with our elected officials, not only at the national level, but at the local level. And one of the tools that I found to be most useful for doing this is this resist bot. It's something you can access if you have ever sent a text message. And to do that, to start playing with it and experimenting with it, you really just have to take this step of texting the word resist to the number 50409. And we'll have a chance to demonstrate this in the breakout. What I'm just going to say now is that once you do that, the first time you do that, I know some of you have already done this, you'll register your information, like of where you vote. And after you do that, you can, in the space of a few minutes, send a message, send a letter through your phone, to your text messaging service, to anyone down from the president to the mayor. And I would say I've tripled the amount of messages, communications I've done with my elected officials ever since bringing this tool. I kind of can anthropomorphize a little bit this personal assistant into my life. And that is what we will be demonstrating at the breakout with a few different methods. Notice there's a website at the bottom of the slide. It's really like a mini manual. Highly recommend this. And if you just have that in your mind, the website resist.bot and the action text resist to 50409, you're pretty much set. But if you want to get a little bit more of a how-to, come to the demonstration.
Cool, Seth. Thank you.
That's all.
So, and I realize I jumped into Seth without sort of transitioning for people. We had our main speaker and she'll come back after the breakouts, but we use this time to get updates and from our campaigns. And Seth is the lead of the Divest and Defund campaign. And you may recognize him here. He's playing JP Chase, who is going to marry Ms. Tarsands. And we had an event on October 23rd trying to disrupt this unholy union. And Seth, so I was going to read this slide, but you can jump in if you, so the Divest and Defund does actions in the street, like in front of Chase Bank, does a lot of digital actions. And I believe that tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we're going to be planning what to do next. You want to say anything about that, Seth? Are we good?
Maybe just that this is the action, you can't see it in the photo, but this is where we were also getting signatures on that petition. And the demo will be a little bit customized depending on who shows up. And yes, tomorrow at 7 p.m., the Divest Defund meeting.
And if you're not on that mailing list and you're curious, if you email divest.defund@350madison.org, Seth, but Mr. Divest.defund will send you a Zoom link. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to, we have a lot of, I'm really looking forward to November 30th, and I want Stephanie or Maya to tell us more about that.
Hi, everyone. This is Stephanie Robinson. I'm not sure that you can see me if there's anything I need to do about that, but I'm 350 Madison's Development Director, and I'm excited to tell you about our plans for Giving Tuesday this year. Giving Tuesday falls on November 30th. It's after Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and Cyber Monday. And it's our 4th year participating in Giving Tuesday, and this one's going to be better than ever. So just some background. Giving Tuesday is a global day of giving that unleashes the power of people and organizations to transform their communities and the world. It's a very important fundraiser for 350 Madison. It helps to fund and resource all the great work that our campaign teams are doing and have been talking about. And our goal this year is to raise $15,000. But also making it very special is that 350 Madison is celebrating our 10th anniversary with a theme of We're All In. And you're hearing about it for the first time. We haven't really shared this yet. We're going to be doing a hybrid celebration, which means that we'll be celebrating in person at Garver Feed Mill and doing a portion of the event on Zoom. So we have a really fantastic space at Garver that's very spacious. They have great ventilation there. They have garage doors that roll up. And so it seems like a great place for us to meet, but we know that some folks won't feel comfortable coming in person. And so that's why we'll be doing a portion of the event on Zoom. So if we could put in the chat, there's a registration link. The event is free, but we do want people to RSVP. So you can start doing that if you want to follow the registration link. And we'll also have that on our website very soon. The other components of Giving Tuesday include a silent auction, and we're also doing a call for poster art. If you are an artist or you know some artists, we can share that in the chat as well. And that is around our theme of We're All In, and also our 10th anniversary. And finally, we have a peer-to-peer fundraising component. And as Julia mentioned, we're going to be doing a breakout about that. So next slide. So we have had just an amazing silent auction last year, and this one's going to be even better. And there is a link that we're going to put in the chat. The auction does not open until November 20th, but you can register anytime. We have been asking for folks to donate, individuals to donate, and have shared a Google form in the past, but I'm also going to share with you another way to do that if you register for the event. And finally, while this is primarily online, we are going to have some special surprise items that will be available for bidding only at Garver in person. So next slide. So just to give you an idea, we've already had lots of donations from local businesses that it's very encouraging to see want to support climate action. And we expect more to come. Next slide. And then the kinds of donations that from individual members are represented here, but this is just kind of a short list. Everything from homemade bread to Spanish lessons, fine art and folk art, crocheted blankets and clothing, guided bird watching with our favorite Julia Isaacs, for example, dance classes, and more. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you an idea what to expect when you go in to register for the auction. This is what the top of the landing page will look like. And there's a menu across the top. But if you scroll down, next page, next slide, please, you'll see there's a button to register now. And once you do that, you will receive a text with your bidder number that will enable you to create an account to bid. It's actually quite easy. Next slide. And this is where on that same page, you'll see a donation portal. So if you had been meaning to do this, but just didn't get around to it, and you make ceramic mugs, like our board member, Josie, or you have some other skill you'd like to share, like ski lessons, you can do that right from the registration page. Next slide. And then this is what the auction preview looks like. So as we add items, you'll be able to scroll down in that same website. And these are actually some of the real items that we have. And this will just continue to grow until we get to the 20th. Next slide. And finally, it is really easy to do this from your phone as well. There's a mobile bidding app. You can see you'll get updates. It'll show you if you're the winning bidder and potentially remind you to come back and bid again if you've been outbid. So it's really fun once you get into it. I hope you'll give it a try. Next slide. And then finally, I just wanted to give like a quick overview about peer-to-peer fundraising. I know all of us have been asked by friends and family at some point or other to support a cause that's near and dear to their hearts. And this is a way that empowers you to do the same and fundraise on behalf of an organization that you're passionate about, 350 Madison. And you can also build support for climate action by making it personal, telling your own story, sharing what your connection is, your experiences with activism. And you do that by creating your own personal fundraising page. So we're hoping to have 10 Giving Tuesday peer-to-peer fundraisers this year. And we have a toolkit that makes it very easy and gives you lots of examples of language you can include and templates. So if it's something you've been thinking about, but maybe you've hesitated a little bit, but you would like to do that, I hope you'll come to our breakout session. I'll be joined by Maya, who is a former intern and current volunteer with 350 Madison, and she's helped us do 2 previous peer-to-peer campaigns, so she's kind of an expert. And I think that wraps it up for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So you've heard, so there's going to be, as you're getting the sense, there'll be these breakout rooms in just about 5 minutes where you can either go hear more from Stephanie about the peer-to-peer, or to Seth about resist.bot, or Emily to hear more about the Federal Reserve campaign. But before we do that, Emily, do you want to wear your cat hat? And make
Yeah,
this
so
announcement?
350 US hat off and 350 Madison hat on. It's me again. Now talking about the communication action team. We are always in desperate need of volunteers. Right now, a particular need is someone to help us with social media. So particularly someone who is knowledgeable at either Instagram and or Twitter, or if you don't want to be in charge of like helping manage one of those accounts, if you're good at creating content for our Instagram page, we can always use you. We also want somebody to help us with our press list. It constantly needs to be updated. So if that's something you're interested in, or if you know someone who's a journalism student, definitely that's a need that we have. But anybody who's got any kind of interested in any kind of communications thing, whether that's writing, editing, photography, videography, web design, any of that stuff, join us. It's a pretty good group of people, I think, but I might be biased. We're also seeking suggestions for a new newsletter title. So something like the Climate Times, or, something like that. So if you've got any suggestions, send them to me. And then we're going to put the best ones to a vote, probably at a later monthly meeting. Yeah, just because newsletter is not necessarily the most exciting title for a newsletter. And we've gotten feedback that we've been calling it action update, and apparently that's been confusing for some people. So yeah, send us your best ideas for a new name.
Thanks, Emily. I think next up we have Nikki for her announcement.
Yes, so I would like to recognize our volunteer of the month this month. And this month it is Marion, who you have heard from today already. She is on the monthly meeting team, which I forgot to put on the slide, but she's also heavily involved in the climate justice team. And has been since the very beginning of the climate justice team. She was co-leading a prior climate justice work group. And then when it was turned into a campaign team, she was there to co-lead it with Tanis. So she has been there for the beginning of climate justice work that we've been doing. And she's been really instrumental in helping achieve the team's mission, which is leading efforts to reach out to BIPOC organizations to make sure that those who are most affected by the climate crisis are the voices that we're hearing. So one of the ways that she facilitated that was encouraging 350 Madison members and staff to take part in the Nehemiah Center's African American history class. And that was such a good experience. I was a part of that. And Marion was one of the facilitators of one of the 350 Madison groups. Just so professional and so good at facilitating those really difficult conversations about racism, as well as working with Freedom Inc. and supporting their people's budget. And as a part of the monthly meeting team, you see her today helping out behind the scenes, and she has arranged to have some of our speakers do climate justice presentations in the past, people like Sam Grant and the recent Portland Clean Energy Fund. So in addition to that, she also makes beautiful jewelry that she donated to the Giving Tuesday auction last year, and helps out with the garage sale we had in the summer. Just all around extremely helpful. So we really thank you, Marion, for everything that you do, and really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nikki. How sweet. Thank you so much.
Okay, yes, thank you. And I'm very glad you're in the monthly meeting team. So the last but not least, the Community Climate Solution Team is going to make a few quick announcements.
Right, and I, Susan Millar, am going to be representing the Community Climate Solutions Team this evening. We are delighted that our Dane County has been named by the EPA as one of 5 Green Power Leadership awardees, keeping company with the likes of Microsoft, Starbucks, Boston University, and the University of California. I mean, really, how great is that? And we have so much to thank our Kathy Kuntz for. She's not here tonight, but she really is a key mover, as well as Joe Creasy, the supervisor for Dane County, who's been doing this work quietly and superbly for quite a long time. And you're going to get a chance, if you move to the next slide, or not this slide, but the slide after that. So I'll mention that there's 3 of our 3 meetings that are regular monthly meetings. The Community Climate Solutions monthly meeting is on the 3rd Thursdays of the month from 5 to 6. We keep it to an hour. If you have any questions, would like to receive the Zoom link, just contact me, susan.millar@350madison.org. We'd love to have you. This is a place where you can learn about what all the different teams within CCST are doing. We have one very super active and excellent group, the State Policy Group, which is led by our own Gail Nordheim. And that meets regularly on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month from 4 to 5:30. And you can see how to contact Gail there to get on that mailing list. And also, following up Emily's points about the need for people who are good at communicating to larger publics, we have a new local content engagement group led by our own Julia De Palma, and that meets on the 2nd Mondays, again from 6 to 7. And you can contact Julia at 350madison.org. So those are 3 of our meetings. And if you want to know anything else about CCST, just let me know, because I orient folks to CCST. Last, the Community Climate Solutions team is organizing the next Madison 350 monthly meeting, which will be on the 1st Monday of December, which will be the 6th. And so we are missing a name from this slide. I did not know how to edit this slide, and I apologize for that. We have three community leaders who will be participating in a panel discussion about how state and local governments in our area are interacting to fight climate change. The most local of those individuals is going to be Jessica Price, who is our new, the City of Madison's new Sustainability and Resilience Manager. So she'll be representing a city, the City of Madison. And then moving up to the county level, we have Kathy Kuntz, who I was just referring to, superb leader at Dane County's Office of Energy and Climate Change. And last, but certainly not least, we have the director of the Wisconsin Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, Maria Redmond, who's been very active lately in gathering suggestions and information about how to proceed with a clean energy plan for the state. So stay tuned for that panel discussion on the 6th of December. Over to you, Julia.
Yes, thank you, Susan. And we're excited. The monthly meeting team is excited to be working with you on that panel. So we're about to transition to our breakout groups. This is where, so we like to get feedback from you, through chats and things. And we sometimes experiment with a Zoom poll. So we're gonna ask you to do a Zoom poll. There it is there. We have 2 questions. Did the meeting empower you to take an action related to climate change in the next 2 weeks? That's yes, no, or other. And then we're curious what best describes your current involvement with 350 Madison. And I'll stop talking so I can take my action.
Co-hosts, I
Oh,
don't.
I can't vote. That's okay. That's okay. I'll do it in my mind.
But everyone else, hopefully you can see this. And we also have pretty straightforward questions this week, but we're hoping to use this as a tool to get feedback about speakers and future topics in the future. This is kind of a test run to make sure we know what we're doing with Zoom, and also to get a little feedback from this meeting.
So we'll give you another 30 seconds to fill out your responses. Okay. Oh gosh, almost everyone's voted. Great, you guys are great at this. So, oh, should we show the responses? Do you want to do that?
Figure out if I know how that works. All I can see is end poll.
Right, I think if you click that.
Oh, here we go. Share
Share.
results. Ta-da!
So 97% of you said something about this meeting empowered you to take action related to climate change in the next 2 weeks, which is excellent. And it's wonderful to hear that 6 of you are relatively new. And I would encourage you, especially if you haven't met her before, to stay in the main room and meet Nikki, who helps orient people and gets to know them, new people. And then 14% have been involved like 3 to 12 months. 45% of us, and I'll put myself in this category, have been regularly involved more than a year. And then there's 5 that have been around for a while and sometimes active and sometimes less so. So thank you for that. And now, this is your time to choose. You want to hear more about the Federal Reserve? You'll go into Breakout Room 1. You want to know more about resist.bot, and I heard Seth say he would tailor this to the people in the room. You can get hands-on training. You're curious about peer-to-peer fundraising? Not that you're quite ready to sign up to be one of our 10 volunteers, but you might want to know more about peer-to-peer fundraising. Go into room 3. And if you're exhausted and need to sign out, it's all good. Are the breakout rooms open? You see it says join a breakout room? So
It should be.
You, hopefully you can figure it out which room to go to, 1, 2, or 3. And if you have any troubles, Kelly will get you somewhere. Just send her a
Just
chat.
put it in the chat if you can't figure it out yourself, and I'll move you over.
I'll go to 1.
Who wanted to go to room 1?
I do.
John?
Yes, please.
Okay, got it.
Looks like Seth wants to move over to room.
I tried to get Seth into that room.
I think you got it.
He should be in there. So Judith, Monica, Phyllis, any of you guys want to go into another room?
No, not I.
Yeah,
This
I'm
is
not-
a newcomer room.
Yeah.
I want room 1.
Oh,
Federal
newcomer,
Reserve.
yes.
I'm sorry, Judith, you wanted room 1?
No, Federal Reserve, is that room 1?
That would be room 1. You're there. Monica, you're good where you are? And Phyllis, you're good, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, have fun.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right. So welcome. So this newcomers meeting is just to talk through a little bit about what we have available at 350 Madison as far as volunteer opportunities, and get you connected to what you might be the most passionate about and what you are the most interested in. So we usually start this out by just having you introduce yourself, why you want to get involved, and what interests you about climate change work. And then if you don't know, that's totally fine too. And I'll talk through some of the different teams that we have so that you can get a better idea of what the options are. So who would like to start?
I can go.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Chandra. Yeah, this is my first meeting. I just wanted to get involved in some way locally to take action against climate change. I care about it deeply, and I have 3 children, and I really, worry about the future for them, especially. So honestly, yesterday I just Googled like local groups in Madison, and I found this, and it seems great. So I don't really know exactly what I want to do. I don't have like any experience really with activism or in politics, but I'm eager to learn and to help. So I'll kind of help wherever I can.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we're all introduced here, I'll talk through some of those options, and you can pick what sounds most exciting to you to start with. Generally, people start doing one thing, but you're not locked into that for life either. Since you're not quite sure if you start in one campaign and you're like, I like this, but maybe my passions lie elsewhere, you can always move around and figure out what is the thing that captures you the most. All right, Erica?
I'm Erica Schroer. This is also my first real meeting. I came to like part of one a long time ago, and somehow the internet dropped during this, like when I started this breakout room. And anyways, it's good to be back. And I think generally I'm more able to like do stuff now. I have just turned 3-year-old son, and I think I might have to duck out early again.
No worries, no worries.
But, so I definitely want to keep connected. Like, are you, like, if I do have to leave, are you a good person to email or?
Yeah. And if you have to duck out, I'll email you.
Okay, great.
We can, discuss. Usually if people join without this particular meeting, we just set up a 15-minute Zoom call to talk through options. So no worries if you have to duck out.
Cool. Okay, great. Yeah, but I'm excited to be doing or trying to do activism again. I did a good amount in college years. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll just let Phyllis and Kelly briefly introduce themselves, just so the two of you are aware. They are not newcomers. They are hanging out here to meet our newcomers though.
Right. So I'm Phyllis Hasbrook, and I've been with 350 Madison since I think 2014 and been on staff since 2016. And I'm the co-lead of the tar sands team, not the Tarzan team. And that's someone else. So we fight pipelines, and it's a joint team with the with Sierra Club, Wisconsin chapter. And I also am very active in the art collective. So if any of you are artists in any way, speak up and we'll get you onto the listserv for the art collective, which does really things like you saw that wedding picture, the mock wedding of tar sands and JP Morgan Chase. Yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, so I'm Kelly Kearns, and I am on one of the support teams. We have, in addition to the campaigns like the Tar Sands and Divest and Defund and the Climate Community Solutions team and the Climate Justice team, we also have these support teams. So like there's a fundraising team, which I am not on. I'm not a fundraising kind of person, and so I won't be doing that. Although I am participating in the auction. I did donate some things for the auction. So I am on the monthly meeting team. So our team puts on these meetings every month. And so we are the ones that find the speakers, get them kind of organized, get all the staff and the volunteers to submit their announcements, and then make sure that everybody is ready for these monthly meetings. And generally, we've got it pretty well tuned now, so that they work pretty well, and we get a lot packed into an hour for a meeting. And so that's a team that I really like, because I see real things happening, and I see new people coming every time and new people sticking around. And so I really appreciate being on that team, and it's really great to work with Julia and Marion and Christina on that team. So the other support teams, Nikki and Phyllis, help me out here.
Yeah, I can.
CAT team, communication action.
Mm-hmm. So as Kelly's talking about, we have all of what we do is basically split into different teams that are focused on different things. So those teams can be further split into campaigns and support. So our campaign teams are working on specific campaigns, pushing for action in the area that they're working on. And our support teams are often helping with a lot or all of the teams, making sure that what they're doing can run smoothly. So the campaign teams include our tar sands team, which Phyllis introduced, fighting pipelines, and making sure that we are blocking